They may have a candle that's big enough that they need 3 or 4 wicks. They're only using 1. So you kind of know how that happens, right? So you have a big candle, right? And they got 1 wick. So as this is burning, what happens? Come on, I'm with you. I know you're going to get this. I have faith.
As it's burning, what happens?
What's going to happen? It's going to pool down here. This is going to burn out. The sides are going to stay, and you're not going to burn the whole candle all the way down. So what they do is they'll add another wick here, another wick here, and now that whole candle burns down. So it's doing the research when they're actually making the product to know, is it going to work or not.
That was not a trick question.
Yeah. So when you go to a store and you buy a candle, you expect it to make the whole room smell well, right? So you light the candle and you come back in here in 15 minutes, you want it to smell like blueberry or cotton candy or whatever you bought. Mm-hmm. One of the things that they do, and you'll learn this by candle making, is when you first pour the candle, let's say you pour it to here, when it cools, it kind of makes a dome in it, right? But when you look at a candle, it's nice and flat, and it's pretty, and it's clean. What they have to do is they have to do a second pour. And that second pour is where that fills in and looks really nice and pretty. Now, what a lot of companies do, which a lot of people don't think this is right, is that second pour might be at 10% and the rest of the candle be at 5%. Why would they do that?
Well, they want you to smell it right away.
The way you sell a candle is hot throw and cold throw. Okay, now just think what that means. Hot, cold. Cold is off the shelf when you just look at the label and you pick it up. That smells good. So that's why they add a little bit more to the top load. Pick the candle up, you smell it, you go, man, that's good. Then you take it home and you burn it and you go, wow, it's just not as strong as it was at the store. That's usually what's happened here. Usually the bigger guys are doing it, and I've heard different stories on why they do it. One of them is, well, the fragrance is all on the top. By the time it melts this down, it's really going to kind of mix in the middle, so we're getting an average of like 7%. But you know, that's, and you're like, well, I get it. You still got to sell the product. It's still got to smell good, right, for them to be able to buy it. And if it lowers their cost a little bit and the customers aren't picking it up, not that big of a deal. The problem is, though, if your customer goes, God, I've been burning this thing all day and I can barely smell it, that's a one-time purchase. They're not going to come back and buy your product again. So you still have to make sure whatever you're doing in this realm, that the customer still feels they had value, it still was a quality product, and that they're going to come back and rebuy. And candles, I mean, that's one of those things everybody and their mother buys a candle, right? It's great for a holiday. It's great for birthday. It's great, hey, you're just not feeling good. Here's a nice candle. You know, a date. I mean, candles are endless on the reasons why people buy them. I actually saw a seminar, I think in Vegas and New York, and they said a candle is there when you're born and a candle is there at your funeral. And I was like, never thought of it that way, but it's pretty valid, you know. So candles all the way across the board, multiple avenues. Now, what is the price range for a candle? You have the cheapo dollar store, right? And what's the max out for a candle?
Well, if you include the ones that have jewelry in them now, they're like $25.
Okay, 25 bucks. They actually can get up to like 40, 50 bucks, even up to 80 bucks, right? So you're talking about the jewelry company. We actually sell to a lot of those jewelry guys. So one came up with the idea, right? And then all of a sudden like 20 of them launched. So right now, the way the economy is, when someone has a good idea, it's so fast for people to replicate that same business model that it was almost like we were selling close to the same fragrances to multiple companies, and all of them were selling. And you went from like a cheap, like China jewelry worth like a nickel up to like Pandora $200-$300 bracelets. So it's kind of weird how the gauntlet went, but they all were charging the same amount of money. So one of those guys was making gobs of money and another guy wasn't making that much money, so it depends on your model.
Like the baby in the Mardi Gras cake.
King cake, you got it. All right, so when the customer calls, the next thing you got to find out is where are they falling in the spectrum. Are they selling, a dollar store? Are they selling $8 craft, $25 jewelry, $40 high-end candle? Usually you're going to find out that if they're a mom and pop. Are they out of their garage? Are they just starting to sell maybe on Amazon or eBay? Or they're actually at the mart and they're actually hitting the bigger shows. Those are the ones that'll be in like a Kohl's or a Walmart and places like that. So when you're looking at these, you don't really know all the time talking to them on the phone. I mean, some of the nicest European women I taught with were the smallest accounts I ever had. And then the biggest redneck that ever called me was one of the biggest candle companies I dealt with. So it's a weird mix when you're talking to him on the phone. You're like, oh yeah, this guy's out of his garage. And then he starts talking about, oh yeah, we buy tankers of wax and this, that, and the other. You're like, huh. So it's a weird mix. Candles, you never really know. And the other thing is they can be doing great for years, have one bad year where they don't go around and do all the shows and anything, and all their business dries up. Or even like you're saying with the jewelry, there's only one or two front runners that's going to be in that line. So the two front runners are going to get all the business, and then the other guys are going to slowly start dwindling off. Now, if they're good and they know what they're doing, they'll swap out. So they'll have their typical 20 or 30 fragrances that they've been buying forever, which would be like a cinnamon, sugar cookie, pine, the staples. And then every year they're going to add like 10 or 12 new fragrances, and then they'll discontinue them. So they'll have like a new spring line and a new lilac and a new go to the beach and this, that, and the other. And then 6 months later, they won't be buying any of those. Completely seasonal. Yeah. Other than burn issues, pouring issues, I would say cost is always big with candle guys, because if they get a big project, they're trying to get it cheaper. Can we make it cheaper? Most of the time, yes. So we can do like lower price versions of fragrances, right? Let's say they're buying a $12 fragrance and now they need it at $8. Can we do that? Most likely, but you start going down a slippery slope, because then all of a sudden you do an $8 version and then they get another piece of business. They call back and they say, hey, can you do $7.50? And then you do that one and they come back and they go, hey, can you do $6? By the time you get to the end, it's a really crappy fragrance. It really is. So long term, that usually doesn't work. But as they go into different accounts, there's different price points. This might be a boutique. This might be the first time they go to the mart. This might be when they get a big chunk of Walmart business. Because Walmart has a certain dollar amount and they say, this is all we're going to pay and that's it. And they try to make it work. All right. Candles. What other exciting thing can I tell you about candles? All right, this is always a good one. So, you have two candles. And this one has a $8 fragrance. And this one has a $20 fragrance a pound. But I'm selling both of these for $9. And I'm making the same amount of money on profit off of these two candles. How is that possible? You're actually correct. That's exactly it. So let's say $8 a pound, you're using it 10%. For this one being 20, let's say you're using 4%. So the dollar amount of how much fragrance is going into the candle is going to be the same. The percentages are just different. It's really hard to convince a candle person that this is a good option, because this is a better fragrance, you can use less. This is a cheaper fragrance, you're going to have to use more. but they don't want to hear that. I've been using 10%, and when I put 10%, I have great business, and people love my fragrances, and 10% is what I always put in. Yeah, but this is a fragrance that's not very strong. Go to a stronger fragrance, use less of a load. Side-by-side testing, they smell the same, you'd be better off. But a lot of them, I've actually flown to manufacturing facilities where they're doing like thousands of candles at a time. I mean, these places are huge. Like you go out there and you're like, it looks like rainbow colors, right? So in the morning they start with like a yellow, and then they start going to an orange, then they go to a red, then they go to a blue, and you just see all the different colors coming down the spectrum. And the tables are so big, they're barely moving at all, but they're actually going through the assembly line because there's cooling stages and then first load and second load and so on. So it's really neat. But I told him, I said, look, you'll save money on freight. I'm selling you, 8,000 pounds of fragrance just right there on freight. I'll save you $1,000. No, my guys always put 10%. By God, we're going to put 10%. All right. So it depends on what market and what they're doing. But that's exactly it. So when a customer says, oh, we can't afford to put a $20 fragrance into our candle, they could. They just have to use a lower percentage. And they're like, oh, no. But that's the conversation that's had. Anybody tries to do candles. Candles is actually probably one of the easier ones to get into because it really is. There's so many resellers that you can buy a candle kit with wicks and dyes and containers, and you can pour them up in your kitchen, and you can give them out to all your friends, and you guys can say, oh, that's the best candle ever. And then they never come back and ask for another one. That's a good sign you have a problem with your candle building. If they seriously come back and ask you for another candle, you're probably on to something, right? Yeah, candles, the gauntlet.